What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is your Sunday Report, which we will broadcast here on Blackballed every Sunday. And here we are, introless, but with a man who needs no intro. His name is David Wallace. David, how are you, buddy?
Cheers. How are you? Not so bad.
Yeah, good. We're intro today, and this is par for the course because I have a new computer and it's great, but I didn't migrate all of my files. So, but I wanted to have you here because first of all, it was a big week south of the border as well.
Mm.
I was listening to Dave. Do you remember so the Trump convictions and everything? Do you remember David Axelrod, one of Obama's an Obama
Yes.
administration guy? I don't know if he was chief of staff. I don't remember his exact title, but he said something that I had said earlier on this week about the conventions in the United States for the Republican Party and for the Democrats. The Republican Party convention is in Milwaukee in June, and it is going to probably garner some anti-abortion protests and things like that. But the real juggernaut is going to be the Democratic uh, convention in Chicago in July. And if you remember Chicago in 1968, I think it was 1968, the Democratic convention, they made movies about it. I see something like that happening to the Democrats because what's happened since the Trump convictions has been this sort of assault on the Biden administration, saying that, just sort of parroting the Trump talking points about how it was a witch hunt, how it was all kind of cooked up to try to get him not to run for president or to try to make him lose. I think he's been galvanized again, and I think he's probably going to win again. And I wanted to start there because it's current, and I wanted to know what your thoughts were as a person who has been behind the scenes in various places, dark corners, dark alleys, all the above. But you've seen the shit happen before, and what we're about to pivot into after that is how many of the things that you've said have turned out to come true, like dozens and dozens of things over the past 3 years, and well, even more than that. What do you see for the Democratic convention in July?
Well, the potential for violence due to the recent division of most societies is extremely high, but it's just as likely to happen on the Republican side. Either one would basically lead us to where it seems we're inevitably heading, anyways, which is a conflict, potential civil conflict built on ideologies, political ideologies, and social ideologies. And that's terrifying. Um, it's the potential is high for violence, the way things are trending. And I've read Republican comments and Republican supporters' comments about how the United States government went after Trump for things that were common among all U.S. presidents. They just chose to pursue convictions. And it's not right. It's not fair. Free Donald Trump. Donald Trump is innocent. Well, if you're conceding on one hand that they're going after him for something that is common among all presidents, um, and you're assuming that he is, in fact, guilty of these particular charges, then why would you let him go unpunished? Do two wrongs make a right? That's bullshit. That's why we're in the position we're in. And the thing is, people think politicians are in on some great conspiracy. All right. Now, you hear it all about it. Guys like Alex Jones, they build their careers off of this. There's a conspiracy. There are deep, dark men who sit around in caves, jacking off, painting themselves with whatever, dancing around in their underwear and praying to a goat. I don't know. But this is the bullshit that you hear. Now, a conspiracy doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is in on something. These politicians, they come into a party because they believe in its ideology. And as they progress through that ideology, their opinions are shaped by the community that supports them, their constituents. So over time, they tend to adopt the same core principles and beliefs as their constituency. They're true believers. On the conservative side, the liberal side, the Democrat side, the Republican side, it doesn't matter. It's the principle remains the same. So these politicians aren't in on a conspiracy. What they're in on is they are the floor managers of a big business. People aren't controlled by devil worshippers who sit in the Vatican or whatever the bullshit is that you hear. It's very
They
entertaining.
don't drink baby's blood. Come on, David.
Well,
Give
I
me a
mean,
break, man.
maybe they do. I don't know, but what I do know is that this country and the United States of America and most countries are owned by giant funds. You want to look at who your owners are. It's places like BlackRock and State Street. The giant conglomerates that own the media conglomerates, well, they're all owned by the big funds. So it doesn't matter who wins or loses because the deal is you're trying to drive stock prices, dividends. It's a business. Everything's a business. And I know this not because I'm privy to some deep, dark secrets. It's because during my career, and if you look through what has come through, even the Ford administration admitting, not denying the story that they asked me to spy on a minister, not denying the story that they were seeking back channel communications with Mr. Putin. They confirmed it. Their defense was Mr. Wallace is a known associate of the Russian government. Well, you just robbed this liquor store, but we know that owner, that prick, he likes those Ruskies. So they're innocent. You see how this goes?
For those just joining us, you're tuned into the Powder and Fabio show.
Ah,
Um,
sorry about that.
no, I'm apologizing too because I look extraordinarily white tonight. Like
You
I know
do.
I'm white.
You do.
Yeah, I don't know. The lighting is I see. I don't have the type of skin tone where good lighting works for me because you can barely make out my face from the wall behind me. So it's tough sometimes if I don't blink. You said it's a business. One of the biggest businesses in politics, as you know, is disinformation, both in the media
Absolutely.
and behind the scenes. And one of the amazing things that I've noticed is how people that support Donald Trump are just locked in on the simpleton's version of what these convictions were about. They say that it's about campaign finance violations, and it's not. It's about how the campaign money that you spent trying to silence extramarital affair was then used they doctored the accounting documents so that they could hide the fact that the money was even spent. So that's not a campaign finance violation. That's like doctoring your books, cover-ups,
Also part
fraud,
of the
all of
course
those
of
things.
American
Right.
government.
But people are saying, but the low information consumer is trying to say that everyone has done it. And no, not really. Like if you take campaign money and spend it on something you shouldn't have, that's a campaign finance violation. If you spend it on something you shouldn't have, and then domino effect doctored all of your accounting files and your submissions, that is a totally different animal. That's not quite the same thing as just campaign finance violations. That's fraud now. And I talked about this on Casual Friday, I believe. Or yeah, I think it was Casual Friday, where I was saying out loud, and I'm just thinking out loud. So on one hand, I think that Trump probably deserves jail time, right? 34 felonies. A regular citizen would probably go to jail. Now, not only
They
do I
wouldn't
think
prosecute him if he was a regular citizen. I guarantee it.
well, they would have prosecuted him if he. Well, how do you prosecute a regular citizen for campaign finance laws if unless you're not a regular citizen? But the point is, though,
My belief is they look. I mean, they wanted to get
well,
him. They got him. Is he guilty? Sure, he is. But they're all guilty. And you didn't let me finish my thought. I said the reason I know this isn't because I'm privy to some big secret. It's because every time one of these politicians, with your personal knowledge on Patrick Brown during that thing, every time one of them has to go and somebody else has to be put in their place, or anytime a mayor needs to be met, or something needs to happen with another mayor, or whatever, it's the same people who pay me for whoever the problem belongs to. Is it a conservative? Is it an NDP guy? Is it a liberal? It's all the same. It's all the same because either any outcome benefits because the choices, as you can see, are not exactly overwhelmingly positive on any side of the aisle these days.
What
It's
what I
just
would what I was going to say though is that I think he deserves jail time, but I think it would be a mistake to put him in jail. And the reason why is because, and this is where I can totally accept someone thinking that what I'm saying right now is unacceptable, because there's almost a social engineering aspect to what I'm saying, and there really is. And I don't. But if you gun to my head, would I put him in prison? No, even though he deserves it. And the reason why is because I can easily foresee innocent people dying if that cult following motherfucker gets put in jail, because all of his supporters are armed, and they've been doxing the judges, the juries, the jurists. They've been doxing the lawyers. I think that it would result in people getting hurt if they put him in jail. Now, the flip side to that is that if he doesn't go to jail, he can still run. He can't vote, which is funny, but he can still run. And if the Democrats don't replace Biden at the top of their ticket, I say he wins. So it's a weird, tricky thing. And who knows? What would be hilarious is if they put him in jail and he still ran and won and became president of the United States from Rikers Island or something like that. Like, he'd have a pretty dope cell probably. Just bringing the nuclear football into a cell in Rikers Island, like that'd be hilarious.
how do we live in a world with AI yet people believe that we still have what's Trump in his 70s, Biden, God knows.
78. I think Biden's 80 now or something like that.
Do
Like,
people really believe that the ultimate fate of the world belongs in the nuclear football carried by one of these old bumblefucks? I mean, sorry, guys, come on. At the end of
okay.
the day, Donald Trump, if he goes to jail, there'll be violence. If he doesn't go to jail, there'll be violence. If you look at how a stock trends, it trends up or it trends down. When something is rising this quickly, you know what's next. It's food prices are up, inflation's up, and it's worldwide. I mean, we're a society that is heading towards a train wreck, and it's scary. It's very scary because the pressure keeps getting ramped up. It gets ramped up by people like David Parker, who comes in and galvanizes and weaponizes religion as a tool for trying to basically rig the democratic process and steal elections. Two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, we
Let's
have
go
to
back.
be
I want to go
serious.
back to that. Sorry to cut you off, but I want to go back to that because we never had a chance to actually talk about that without a third guest, which was Marco, whose last name always messes me up. But Van Gousing, how do you say it?
Oh,
You don't know either.
Higginboss, I believe.
Higginboss, Van Higginboss. Yeah, that sounds right. Um, Tell me, now that it's out, now that the story's out, and now that Marco's not here, I want you to tell me, and this is going to be redundant for some, but not for others, about what he approached you with, why it's important, and how his antics have created a sort of mythical political mind in Alberta when maybe it wasn't all it was cracked up to be with him and what his motivations were.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, we're talking about David Parker here, not Marco.
Correct. Correct.
David Parker. I'd been watching him since his ascension. Um, I knew that he was the force behind sticking the knife in old Kenny's back. There was a lot of people who were looking to do it, and Davey managed to take his shot and make it stick. He had, behind cover of darkness, done this, and politically, he'd come out of nowhere. If you look at it, he'd been in Ottawa, completely unremarkable. I know he saw it a different way, but unremarkable, and at the time not up to the task. And Jenny Byrne had him removed. That's at least his version of events. And that is, I believe, with good reason, has driven his every move. Um, he sees himself as a kingmaker. And he also saw this, in my belief, as an opportunity to um, raise his own profile. He speaks of this is for the people. these sort of things, wholesome, wholesome intentions, but on the other hand, it's wanting to gather information and build lists. And if you look in some of those screenshots, you'll see about Nenshi helping Nenshi, and that's timely because in some of the headlines that I've seen on Twitter, of course, this has popped up that there's suspicion that people within the UCP have bought NDP memberships. Well, of course they have. And yes, they want to get in, and they want Nenshi they don't want Nenshi to be a problem in the next election. And they know he would be, and they can't risk it. And even if he weren't, they believe him to be an existential threat on the provincial level, even if they're wrong. Maybe Nenshi doesn't win the leadership. Maybe he gets voted in. Maybe he bombs as a leader. But their belief, and it's probably been reinforced by how many years was he mayor in Calgary? 12?
Yeah,
A long
something like
time.
that.
It's
And
probably
the greatest thing about Nenshi's time as mayor is that when he was running as a there was two things that was good. First, his campaign, it's going to be taught in classrooms in the future as a case study for a near perfect municipal campaign. When he first won, he started, I think it was called the Purple Wave or Revolution or something like that, and he just did coffee talks, and he sat across tables with regular people tirelessly, like 20 different, coffee shop appearances a week for a solid 6 months or something like that, and got to know everybody. And his political rivals, Rick McIver being one of them, who ended up, I think, being a minister in Kenny's government. I actually met with him a week before the election because I was at Calgary Stampede at the time. I think I was doing the Adrian Grenier thing or something for Stampede, this documentary I was working on with him, and uh, I went to his campaign office just to meet him. I introduced myself. I just told him, like, I'm a freelancer, but I'm doing this thing in town, and I just wanted to come and just sort of like talk to you and just ask you what your thoughts were on the election. He thought that they were doing well. They were polling sort of neck and neck, and I was like, "What are you going to do about young people?" And his campaign manager came out to me and was like, "Young people don't vote, so we don't fucking bother with them." And I walked out thinking, "You lost. You've already lost, and you don't even know it yet." And the second thing about Nenshi is that people like McIver were spreading rumors that he was a gay Muslim. And it was interesting because his popularity went up after that rumor was mercilessly spread throughout the Calgary confines. And I thought it was interesting that a Western Canadian city had a mayor who won despite being a Muslim. Let's just be honest. It just is a juxtaposition a little bit, right? And then also the fact that, like, people were spreading rumors that he was gay, and because he sounds kind of effeminate sometimes, right? So it seems like it almost seemed real at the time, but he won, and I
I think
thought it
he
was
sounds
great.
a
I
bit like
thought,
Kermit the Frog, personally. No offense. I mean,
pardon me.
I think I don't know if he sounds gay, but he sounds like Kermit the Frog to me. I don't mean to
Well,
be rude, but I
listen,
just
we're a couple of straight white guys trying to tell people of something that's difficult in 2024, which is that if you were gun to my head, yeah, I thought maybe there was possible that he was a gay guy because, because of stereotypes and generalities. Let's just be honest, right? Anyways,
yeah,
the point that I'm trying to make is that he beat all of the odds, and he became mayor, and he was mayor for over a decade. And I think that a lot of lessons could have been learned of how politics can transcend demographics often, right?
yep,
But then you find tirelessly people, his detractors, his ideological opposites, were against him from the beginning. And the reason why I bring that up is because David Parker is one of those types of people.
yep,
He's an operative, right? Like, he is one of those people, like we said on the show the other day, he was one of the he's the one that probably gets the most credit for ending Jason Kenney's time as premier. And I like talking to you about this stuff because people have a very, very general idea that politics is dirty, but they have the bumper sticker idea about how politics is dirty.
Yep.
When you lift the hood and you explain to regular voters why politics is dirty and what makes it dirty and specifically what people do to make it dirty, people are often shocked because there's
Yeah.
a big difference between the bumper sticker of dirty politics and the textbook of dirty politics.
Yep. Absolutely. And people believe that when they hear of these things, they tend to dismiss certain scandals out of hand. They can't believe, such as if you look through my books, people who paid me by Interact e-transfer these guys over the years on certain jobs, or by wiring money directly into my bank for my payment when I did it. That was so I could have a record of them. I mean, they're not that bright. These aren't super smart guys and gals, okay? Most of the time, I'm going to correct you. David Parker isn't an operative. David Parker is a more of an asset, more of a flamethrower. He's somebody who has a burning desire to ascend the ladder, who felt socially awkward. And I base these opinions on private conversations I've had with Mr. Parker when I insinuated myself into his life after I had ascertained some of the things that were going on and decided that he shouldn't be in the business of influencing who sits in the seat of power in the province of Alberta no more, because he was bad news all the way. I've seen his type before. So David is the type who felt left out, who had come back from Ottawa with his tail between his legs because Jenny Byrne had put her foot up his ass and he wasn't loved enough by Stephen Harper. So he came back to Alberta and he started working tirelessly. He became a magnificent organizer, probably the best in the entire country. And it was driven by that inadequacy, that slight that sat on his shoulder. And from there, he decided that he deserved credit, that people needed to see that he had done it, that it was him and him alone, which is why he was led into conflict with his friends, his partners, such as Marco, his ex CFO. These things were becoming about David and his grandiosity, which is fine, but he was then removed from the Ditchley Foundation. The Ditchley Foundation is a rather notorious think tank that allegedly is a source for the British intelligence network. It's full ex spooks, law enforcement, you name it. It's basically a lounge for lizards. And Parker was booted from that. That was my first hint that he had probably run out of rope from his people. And it turned out that he had. David is now concentrating on being a promoter, promoting Tucker Carlson's tour, I believe, the upcoming one that's coming, or at least a portion of it. He's doing whistle stops to the believers, the people who do have good intentions, by the way. And then he dazzles them with the snake oil. He tells them all about his crypto bro and his credit union, the only fucking place that'll bank with him still that hasn't seized his bank accounts. I don't know why. Maybe something to do with the border. Coots. I don't know. Something comes to mind. And then after that, it's his gold guy. So it's a whole floor show that they do for Ma and
I'm
Pa
sorry, wait, hold on. His
Red
gold
Deer.
guy?
Oh, yeah. He brings in some guy to talk about selling gold or gold futures or some damn thing.
Oh, that's so he's like full
He's
on
setting up Amway.
libertarian.
It's multi-level marketing using emotion and religion as your draw. He's a
Yeah.
genius. He's a genius. He has tapped into a market, and he's the guy who just loves to milk the rubes at the carnival. The people who are crying over Trump right now, President Trump will save us. He wouldn't stand for vaccine mandates. Well, guys, who's the one who ordered it, kicked it off with Operation Warp Speed? Like, give your head a shake. These people are obsessed with the belief that we can break every law. Okay. And the other side, we've seen our laws trampled too. Listen, I'm not making any bones about it. But at the end of the day, if we're going to prosecute Trump, we should also prosecute anybody who has been found well in the highest office in our lands of committing crimes, because any crime, no matter how petty, that these people are committing is theft against the people. It's a violation of the trust of the nation of which they sit upon as our moral compass. That's it. I don't care what side of the equation you're on. And most of them that I've dealt with over my career don't have a pulse. There's nothing inside. They're empty suits who like cameras and they like the money and they like how things go. They may believe in causes. Some of them are even real. They believe and they fight. Most of them end up out of cabinets, out of governments, and into private practice because nobody is willing to cross the floor and sit down and hammer out agreements and bills that are good for all Canadians because we are such a philosophical and moral, ethical divide on everything. Everything. And that's amplified by what? By our media, which is complicit. And it always has been. That's why, I mean, the media was vital to my jobs that I would do. Those jobs needed the media's help. Depending on the job was for the left or the right or the middle, whatever, you use the journalists who basically are prone to holding that side's morals, values, or their editor is. Either one, doesn't matter. And that's how you play it back and forth. That's how it's done.
That's interesting that you say that. I've told this story, I think, a couple years ago, but a certain liberal lawyer that you and I both know, that we won't say their name, right? You know which one I'm talking about. I think he paid you a visit in prison one time.
Yeah.
Told me one time that I've been talking to him since I've known him for about 20 years. The first time I met him, I don't remember the name of his client, but it was the liberal candidate in Trinity Spadina when Olivia Chow ran in that riding. And I did a story for Now Magazine where I voted a bunch of times, and then wrote a piece about how easy it was to vote a bunch of times. And somebody asked his candidate, the liberal candidate, about to comment on what I had done. And he said, we need to prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law, right?
That sounds like
And
him.
yeah, but no, it wasn't the lawyer that said that. It was his candidate. Because then the lawyer that you and I both know called me that night, and he's like, "James, it's calling, and just saw, what happened with you, and that." And he's like, he said that he represented that candidate, and said that, listen, my candidate spoke out of turn. He shouldn't have said anything. He's like, he thought that someone had told him that you were working directly for the Olivia Chow campaign, which I absolutely was not. And he said that, he wanted to let me know that he was basically trying to see, and he told me during the Patrick Brown thing, so that's like 14 years later, he's like, if you would have sued my client, the liberal candidate, we would have immediately settled for like 20 grand. And I'm like, fuck, I really could have used that money, right? Like it was amazing. But he told me once, and it was just after the Patrick Brown thing, I think, or during it, how easy it was for him to not just get stories into the Toronto Star, but even his own specific wording of the stories that he got in the Toronto Star. And I was just like, and I kind of thought he was blowing smoke a little bit. And he called me like a week later, and he's like, in tomorrow's Toronto Star, we're talking about an issue. I don't even remember what the issue was, but I told them to use this phrase in the lead paragraph, and if they didn't use that, then I would never talk to them again. And sure enough, like it was actually 2 days later, the story came out, and that exact turn of phrase was in the lead paragraph, and I was just like, wow. And he told me the same thing that you've told me a bunch of times before too, is that reporters and journalists, they don't their pot of gold consists of stories that are consistently given to them
Yep.
by chiefs of staff, interns, other people. Event coordinators are like the eyes and ears of the PMO often, right? Because they have to know everybody that comes in to schmooze and lobby and this and that. They're the greeters. And it's like I used to say about this
It's an
woman that I
ecosystem.
knew that. Pardon me.
That's what it is. It's an ecosystem. People like me,
It totally is.
reporters need me, and I need them. They need content. They need the inside scoop. They need to know where things are going. Some stories that have been brewing for months, years. I mean, they get let out a piece at a time or spread around, or when it's time for somebody to fall. Do you think coordinated media attacks against somebody like Rob Ford at the end, or coordinated media attacks against, say, a candidate like Patrick Brown when he was running for the PC leadership, or a coordinated media attacks that the prime minister is facing right now? Do you think these are all just organic? No, they fever tempers are inflamed, passions are inflamed by day after day of content that you consume from the news, the mainstream, online. I mean, if you actually are paying attention, you become outraged. You become outraged no matter what side of the equation you're on. And these politicians right now are getting both barrels. People say Justin Trudeau controls the media. If that were truly the case, do you think that he would be getting the worst press of any politician I've seen? And I couldn't tell you. It's awful, right? I mean, if I was him, I'd put a rope around my neck and jump, right? I mean, you read everything and he's cooked. This is what you're thinking about it. You're seeing the people want to kill him. He can't go anywhere without cops all around him. He can't go anywhere. I mean, this is,
Yeah.
if that's
You
the
know, what's
media brushing you up, then I'd feel, guys, stop helping me so much. You're not doing me much good.
I saw a couple of interesting stories. One of them was about Brian Lilly. I didn't click that one, but then I just kind of did a little bit of due diligence about how people are surprised how well the conservatives are polling in Quebec. And I remember talking actually to Douglas from the Eager Beaver podcast. He made a point that was true and has been true for many, many years is that the conservatives often turn their backs on Quebec, and and often, if you're going to give up on certain parts of Ontario, if you're going to give up on BC, if you're going to give up on certain parts of the country, you need to get Quebec in order to like give yourself a victory. um Stephen Harper did it for one election, and I don't think he ever got the support again in Quebec after that. But Pierre Poilievre can get Quebec. I see him being our next prime minister, and it doesn't make me feel like the sky's falling, because that's never really the case. I don't think the sky's never really falling. If you were able to sort of stay in the now where you are. I remember people that hated Mulroney thought that he was the worst of all time and our country will never be the same. Yeah. People that hated Chrétien sort of said the same thing. Paul Martin, a little bit. But then Stephen Harper came and it was like amped up. He eats babies. He's like, he wants to sell our sovereignty. He wants to give all our resources to
It's
China.
much
And
different.
some of that might be partially true, but the sky did not fall. And then Justin Trudeau was elected. And now we're in the sky is falling section of Justin Trudeau's administration. And we can always pick apart the things that were bad about it. And we may not come to an agreement. Liberal supporters might not think the SNC Lavalin scandal was a scandal. I happen to think it was. Um, uh, there might be a few other things that people are at odds of, but the point is, and liberals should be happy to hear this from a person that doesn't support them at all. The sky's not falling. It's just another administration that has sort of like has given the nation some fatigue. Because if you're in power for a decade, you're going to remember the bad times that this government has had, and they've had a few. I think my worst complaint about Justin Trudeau's government was that they didn't axe the Saudi Arabia arms deal, because that's the kind of geopolitics that I'm into. Like, I hate religion, and Saudi Arabia is a theocratic regime, and they could have canceled the deal. It would have cost some money, would have cost some jobs, sure, but you can't say on one channel or on one side of your mouth that you're a feminist, and then finalize a Saudi arms deal where they use those weapons and tanks and little armored vehicles against women who they oppress and have been for decades. So you know what I mean? There's always a piece of the fruit that you can bite at, but the sky is still never falling. I don't think.
It's different this time, though, James. I mean,
It's
we're on
always
the
That's
verge.
what they always say, though. It's always
No, I mean, look, we're on the verge of worldwide war. We are in trouble. It's not just our economy; it's all economies. Inflation is awful. It's I don't care what numbers people use or experts they parade out or talking heads or people actually look at data. Data is the first thing that's manipulated in our lives. And I know a neighbor who knows a neighbor who knows a neighbor. Look, I'm homeless. I mean, it's not just me; it's everybody. Everybody is suffering right now. Costs are going up, passions are high. We've never been more divided politically in history. It just hasn't been modern history, at least. We're divided across so many lines, not just religion, not just ideology. We're divided now on an existential level. It is awful. It is trending towards getting much worse. And these are things that we need to focus on right now. We are going we're going day after day, and we're not being engaged in our political scene like people like Mr. Parker are. That's why they are able to manipulate how things unfolded in Alberta, because they are politically active. He's a brilliant organizer, and he is striving to take that same practice to Ontario because people think his cause won't play in Ontario. David Parker's cause can be whatever he needs it to be because David Parker isn't so much concerned about the cause as he is his power. You'll notice that he's positioning himself as standing with all Muslims. He's positioning himself based on religious ideology that states homosexuality is a sin, that whatever. But he is using this as a tool to form alliances with other groups that are quite outside the core values that were stated or started out with and Take Back Alberta. This guy intends to go to Ontario, and he intends specifically to target places like Brampton, where there are racial, spiritual, clannish, whatever it's called, I believe castes, I'm not sure, huge divides. It is a powder keg. The violence in Brampton, as most of Canada has read, is off the charts. It has become a war zone. These are the people he intends to draw from in Ontario. And this isn't me spitting wind. This is direct one-on-one communication. When Davey and I were chatting, prior to him going live on Dean Blundell's show to blast Pierre Poilievre and Jenny Byrne, he had harbored that wish, it seems, for years. And I just encouraged him strongly after listening to
I
him
like
and commiserating for hours. And when he went forward with it, he asked me, he paid me, in fact, for one of the jobs, was to phone a friend of mine named Nathan Jacobson, who was very close with Jenny Byrne, and tell her that unless a list of demands were met, which he had already previously emailed to her apparently, then he was going to go on and he was going to say bad things because, well, they got to go. And of course, they didn't give a damn. David Parker insinuated he had some financial information. Well, if he does, he doesn't want to divulge it because he doesn't want anybody to look at his books either. There's good reason for that. Take Back Alberta would probably be very surprised how some of those funds were spent. I know I'm curious. I'm not alleging anything. I'm saying that I'm a very curious person, and I think you should be too, especially when it comes to the money that you pulled out of your pockets to give to this guy to represent you when who he represents is himself.
I
That's
find
it.
the whole fundraising aspect of politics to be ridiculous on its face. Like I'm never going to give money to anybody in politics ever. Like if I vote for you because of your message,
What
I
about
think
people in
money.
media? What about people in media? People have sent me questions. They've said, you know what? I'm not donating to Dean Blundell anymore for the Canada Proud case. I'm not doing it because he's had David Parker on. You know, he's doing a business deal with him, and that's it. I don't want to go. Now, this is what they believe. They don't know. They haven't seen the finished product. It could confirm their worst suspicions, or it could alleviate those suspicions. But the fact is, it is a perceived influence that even now these political creatures have on not mainstream media, but alternative media. You see, it's insidious, right? It's insidious. it seeps in. Some of the influencers, the most popular shows you have, they are directly influenced by these third party organizations, either directly or indirectly, and they become very successful. They often become little media empires. Think of places like what's that, True North, and all these others. Uh, what was all of them? Candace, all of these people who evolve, they get that way for a reason.
It
There's
only
a
works
reason
on the
for
right,
it,
dude. It only works on the right.
and
I
it works
cannot
well.
name.
It works
It works.
extremely
The
well.
right have mastered this, and we've talked about this before. But the right have mastered monetizing the ideologues on their side much better. Anyways, I'm sure it's happened on the left, but much better than the left has. In the states, you see things like the Daily Wire, the Ben Shapiro outlet. Uh, you see things like uh, oh, what's his name? Well, the Alex Jones stuff, of course, or whatever. The way that right wingers are able to inflame the rage of their base is like nothing I've ever seen, and they have more money than the far left does. The far left, excuse me, you'll see them at like protests. They're often hippies. It's not the same thing. And what we've seen is a lot of trends where centrist journalists or even lefty journalists took a look at their analytics and realized that if they criticize their own side, right wingers will populate their site. And then their analytics will show that if they then criticize the right after that, they'll lose some of the draw that they gained when they criticized the left. So a lot of liberal journalists turned into um, mainstays for right wingers because of how they criticize their own side. Now, I think it's always better to not plant a flag. And this is what I will die trying to do that. I will die. Like, I don't think people can really peg me down or pin me, peg me. They could probably peg me if I did enough drugs, but like, I don't think they could pin me down on, on an ideological side of left or right. Some people think I'm a staunch conservative because um, I'm not a, I'm not a big fan of 85 genders, right? Like, so people are like, oh, he's a conservative, he's a right winger, and then the left, or the right will say that I'm too lefty because I'm very much anti-war. I think that really at the end of the day, if you want to be a media outlet that garners a lot of people, you have to find a way, and I haven't found it yet, but you have to find a way where you can appeal to right wingers on Tuesday and left wingers on Wednesday, because the right wingers, you'll give them Christine Anderson, and the left wingers, you'll give them Noam Chomsky or someone like that.
It's
And to be able
impossible.
to do that consistently, it's not impossible. I'm
It
telling you,
is.
it's not
It
impossible.
is. When you criticize the apple of somebody's eye, they can't not take it personally because they are
They
personally.
can if the very next day you no, but it's not about criticize. See, actually, that's where we
But they
differ on this.
perceive it as criticizing, James. You don't
No,
understand.
no, no, I'm not even
Any,
talking about perception. I'm not even talking about perception.
it's their
I'm
perception about it.
talking about no, listen, just listen for a second. Because I don't criticize my guests, right? So it's not about that. I have Christine
You have them
Anderson on.
on.
I have them on.
That's enough.
And
That's enough right there. That's why they will not listen to
anyways,
you.
so what I'm trying to finish my thought with is that I'll have them on. And so if I have Christine Anderson on, I think that the right might watch that podcast and be like, oh, it's refreshing to see somebody who doesn't seem to be a right winger, but we'll talk to Christine Anderson. And then the next day, I might have like someone on, like Amy Goodman or someone from Democracy Now!, a total left winger. And it'd be nice if the left wing would show up and actually be like, oh, I love Amy Goodman, but it's really the left that's stopping me from having like a big audience because they're still upset that Christine Anderson was on. And it's just like, we never had to do this before. We interviewed terrorists before. We interviewed KKK grand wizards before. Like, I'm talking like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And nobody was like, I'm never watching Walter Cronkite ever again. And far be it from me to compare myself to Walter Cronkite. I'm just saying journalism itself used to cater to a person talking to people. And it didn't matter where they fell in the spectrum. But now we all wave pom poms, so we can't watch Blackballed that Christine Anderson
More
was on.
profitable
Like,
that way.
oh, it's
People will
awful.
consume the product. Media news is a product. How do you get them to consume it? Well, you you make it more exciting. And how is it more exciting? When you're personally invested, when you're personally invested due to a political cause that conforms with your core beliefs. That's how advertising works. It's how it's done.
Right, but I think what we've lost in journalism is the fact that the person delivering the content, I don't think you're supposed to know who they voted for and what their core beliefs are.
No,
Their job is just to get you to understand their guest more, and that's it.
not
And
anymore. Their job now is to basically reinforce any negative news on the opposition that they can, depending on the outlet that they represent, and to reinforce misinformation or misleading information that influence or excuse me favors the either left or right side, depending on who their audience is. And most of it these days tends to be a right wing audience that's the wheelhouse. I mean, it's and there are people who see this, right? I mean, look, no politician, no political party is pure. Like you said, they do business with Saudi Arabia. Well, there's also the United States government. They basically want to stamp out the coal mining industry in Kentucky and get rid of it. And of course, people from Kentucky are extremely opposed to that because it's a way of life. And they say it's bad for you, which it is. It's awful for the environment, which it is. And we want you to get better educations, and they hate it. And most of it's due to ignorance. But there are also people who are in that business who see that while the United States is so desperate to stamp it out here, they also remain the world's one of their biggest exporters, and they sell this stuff to China. So I don't know about you, but we're all living on the same piece of real estate here, and things like trade winds, pollution is pollution. It's the inherent schizophrenia of government. All governments, they're all their morals and values are all extremely malleable,
uh,
depending on their.
Ryan Ryan Lindley from the Getting Sauce podcast and from Casual Friday says the problem is you try to adhere to the Cronkite Walter style. In 2024, it's bought and paid for. Before the interview happens, nobody trusts any of us anymore. See Parker Blundell. So it turns out that the audience is like having a wife, and that really disappoints me.
Absolutely. So now, whether Dean is guilty or innocent, in their mind, it makes no difference. They've already voted. They
But
don't
if you
need to
don't,
hear additional data.
I know that a lot of people are like, why would you even bother? Honestly, I don't want to live in a media landscape as a member of the independent media landscape where I just throw up my hands one day and pick a fucking side. I don't want to do that, and I'm never
There
going
is
to.
no independent media. There is
Well,
either the
we're looking at it.
mainstream
There
mix,
is independent.
or there is independent media that makes money, and others who
Oh,
fall off quickly because they don't find an audience because there's nobody who's wants them to find an audience. I'm not saying that all of them would be hits. Maybe that's not the case. Probably isn't. But if you don't march to the beat of the drum where everybody's going, then you don't get the audience because people, it's not some conspiracy. It's simple. I mean, once people get accustomed to a certain type of information, they look to consume that in many different forms, but they're looking to consume the same content in essence, just delivered by a different host.
yeah. Maybe I could do like far right Wednesdays or something, far left Sundays. I don't know. Something like that. I don't know. I'm never going to stop trying. And you know what? For a person that doesn't have any money behind his show, I'm ranking fairly well. So I actually do have an audience. It's not a huge one, but it's an audience. I feel like if
You're
I
just
was able to put a
dedicated.
little bit of money, I feel like if I was able to put some money into the show and really brand the show as a fuck you, I'm not taking a side, I'll talk to anyone kind of shit. I think it might be able to do well. There's always got to be somebody that can go. Jesperson does an okay job at that. He has people on the show from all sides of the spectrum. He does fairly well, I think. So
Well, and
I
he's got
think
an
that there
audience that says they agree with you.
well, I think that more or less, I think the thing that I want the audience to agree with me on is that it doesn't matter who I'm talking to. It's not a reflection on anything other than that person is current or they play a role in some sort of like issue that's taking place right now. Like who are the country like would I interview I can't think of any human being I would not interview. I really can't. Except for a nobody who just isn't interesting, but like someone that is well known. Would you when I interview someone asked me the other day, would you interview Trump? I know you hate him. I'm like, fuck yes, I would interview Donald Trump. Are you kidding? Like, of course I would. And it wouldn't be for the clicks. It would be because, I've only seen Donald Trump at rallies really and in like typical stale news interviews. And I guess, a Tucker Carlson interview, but whatever. That's nothing that you're not going to unearth any earth shattering, development from that. But it would be fun to take a crack at Trump, not to like get like a punch in, but to actually sit down and be like, what was your childhood like? And what was your mom like? And did you have a good relationship with her? Like, I would like to know that kind. Honestly, my mother, she was a lovely woman. She was a lovely woman. I got my hair from her. Whatever the fuck. I don't even care. I know that he would always spin to a place of nonsensical bullshit, but I'd
They all
interview
do.
him and I don't think I'd get hit with any shrapnel for doing so. Like I still get emails about Christine Anderson, and I'm just like, go be an idiot somewhere else. I don't care. I don't care if you are offended that I interviewed Christine Anderson. That doesn't matter to me. People win Pulitzer prizes for interviewing terrorists. Steve Paikin, who's not exactly some like firebrand conservative, was like, if anybody that's elected to office is a worthy interview, no matter who they are or what country they're from, it's a worthy interview. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when you take it back to Canada and you talk like David Parker should be on CBC. Like when Jason Kenney was ousted, and maybe he was, and I just don't know. But when he was, when he had to resign or whatever, I think they should have interviewed David Parker, and I think that the Canadian people should have tried to understand what politics is like behind the scenes, so we could
But they
all
didn't
clutch our
because
pearls and then actually
David
mean
didn't get
something for
that yet.
once.
See, you got to understand where the man's psyche is because he wasn't, he was behind the scenes. So he wasn't dragged in front of the camera, which he willingly would have went to. That was one of the motivating factors in the breakdown in the relationships that he had with certain people who left, because David wanted to be the star of the show. So he wants to be on the CBCs. He wants to be able to dictate from a soapbox. It's why every time he puts up a tweet, it's somebody insults him. It doesn't matter who it is. He puts up some fucking Star Wars figure pulling out a lightsaber. I mean, this man is a brilliant guy, but
I'm tired of you
psychologically,
calling him
he's
brilliant
stuck
and a
being a
genius.
jaded adolescent.
I'm tired of you calling him brilliant and a genius. Like I don't think so.
Yeah, he has brilliant tactics. I'll tell you why. Because in dedication, in persistence, in methodicalness, there is a brilliance. Most people would get bogged down in the minutia. Most brilliant people are blue sky thinkers, big picture. They're not managers. David Parker is like the Martin Bormann of the Take Back Alberta. He really is. He's the organizer. He's the lever puller in terms of he knows where the paper is, who the donors are,
Mm.
And we don't want to unnecessarily say, but there are a lot of people south of the border who are financing to Parker. You might think of a pillow, maybe my pillow. Maybe you can read between the
Yeah.
lines and figure that out.
Yeah.
There are a lot of
Um.
people who steer this idiot. And he's
Yeah.
not a brilliant man, but he does have traits which allow him to be quite brilliant in organizing, in being a political organizer. That's what makes him dangerous.
Just to go to Ryan. Ryan asks one question nobody's been able to answer about Anderson. Why are you on a world tour? I think I know a partial answer to that, which is, and I talked to Maxime Bernier after a podcast once about this, and a couple other people who sort of hail from the libertarian side of things, where they all know each other, right? And one of the reasons why Christine Anderson was so popular is because in libertarian circles in dozens of countries, Justin Trudeau is extraordinarily unpopular. So when Christine Anderson got up in the European Parliament and tore him a new one, that's how she secured her ability to make appearances in, like, I don't know what it was, 6 to 8 countries in Europe and North America or whatever it was. It was she just wrote all of those appearances off that one speech in the European Parliament where she told Justin Trudeau off regarding, I think it was vaccine mandates or whatever the fuck it was, and that's why she was able to do that. So um, they are very well organized. Like you've seen it, David. You know some of the people that serve in that revolving door of sort of Christian fascist businessmen between the United States and Canada. You
Absolutely.
know, the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church can be included in that
And they're a
milieu, right?
business. They own a lot of medical facilities. I mean, all of these people who are in that circle, they own long-term care homes. They own private hospitals. Here's what I want conservative voters, not the people. I'm talking about everybody on the streets, the people who go to the parades, the people who go to the protests because they feel they're losing their freedoms. They feel this country is becoming too expensive to live in, which is true. It is becoming too expensive here, there, everywhere. It's awful. You know, we're heading into a very rough period of time, but they're driven by a guy standing up, axe the tax, it's going to get better. These people don't represent you because you need to understand these slogans, which have drawn your emotions, make you overlook the fact that this party, its number one agenda is to privatize as much service in this country as they can. We're looking at two-tier medical care. And right now, who can afford that? If you look at the tables, if you look at the facts, the data, very few Canadians are in a large enough tax bracket to be able to afford the level of privatization that is coming. You doubt that what I'm saying? Look at the cost of shopping at Loblaws. Costs are rising,
Oh my
and
god.
conservative policies will only bring in privatization and speed it up. Sales of beer and liquor in Toronto, in Ontario, in these stores. These are all things which will make things much more expensive for us. And we're getting sold a bill of goods from that side too. And the bill of goods we're getting is we are not going to profit from a change in government. They will.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
I found out when I looked over my bank statements that I spend about 2 grand a month on food.
Yep.
2 grand.
It's only going to get higher.
And my kids are only here for they're here every other week. You know what I mean? And it's just I haven't gone to a grocery store and spent less than $200 in like a year or something like that. Like it's crazy. Let's wrap it there because I'm gonna get back to doing what I was doing before, which was trying to get my son to go to bed at a decent hour. What time is it?
And
Oh
we'll
no.
delve more into the Dean and David Parker relationship on an upcoming podcast. And I think people are going to be very surprised. I know I am. I'm sure I am. Based on some conversation, I'm going to be extremely surprised by what we see. I think it's probably going to be a pretty big eye opener for most of Canada, and maybe a wake up call, and
That's
maybe
very ambiguous.
yeah. But it's I think it's something that people need to see on all sides of the equation.
Okay.
There are a lot of people with questions, and they need to be answered.
All right. David Wallace, thanks again, buddy. We'll see you probably in
Tally ho.
I don't know, we'll do something Tuesday or something. All right, bud. I have no music today, so I'm just going to do something like no, I'm not gonna do that. Who do I have this week? I think Max Fawcett is coming on. I haven't nailed down the day yet, but we talked a little bit last week about doing the show. I might do a midweek podcast and then Casual Friday, of course, next Friday. I'll see if Spenny wants to come back. He said he was off podcast, but Spenny also likes to say things like, I don't want to talk about politics online anymore. And then for the next month, that's all he talks about is politics. So, um,